before you get to the example, they'll say things like, I'll do my thing, you do yours. I won't judge you, you don't judge me. One man's meat is another man's poison. I won't judge you. We have no objective basis to judge. Ethics is a mess. It's strange. It's confusing. The heck with it. I'm just not going to make judgments. Now, a thoroughgoing relativist might say there's no moral difference between Mother Teresa and Adolf Hitler. Can't judge that. Both of them were just doing what they wanted to do. We shouldn't judge one as a saint and the other as a sinner. The text does not want to pass judgment on Sam's choice. You may have missed that. I saw it, and I thought, interesting. His choice of whether to disclose the true nature of what he proposed to sell, to disclose or not to disclose, I think that's a moral decision, and we should carefully judge our own decisions and those of others. Otherwise, we wind up saying, I don't know, but there is peril in that path. Oh, it's too hard. I don't know. I guess he should just do what he feels like. Sorry, I won't buy it, and I'll tell you why as we go along. So let's see. We didn't see a whole lot of utilitarians, so Tom Dunphy, one of the people I really love, unfortunately passed away a few years ago. He was at Wharton, at University of Pennsylvania many years, a leading business ethics thinker. And around the dinner table one night, he said, you know, most people think they're utilitarians. You guys didn't, but I won't tell them because I can't. Until they realize what's involved in truly being a utilitarian. And I'm going to ask you, maybe a little bit interactively, to talk about Sam's decision. If he were thinking like a utilitarian, what would he be thinking? And the handout gives you a couple of clues as to bad utilitarian thinking. And the classic is, what's best for me? That's really just egoism. What's best for me as this future scenario plays out, that's the greatest good. Well, it is the greatest good for me, or it might be the greatest good for my company in the short term, but it's not the greatest good for society. That's the test. The overall good, not your good, not your company's good. The handout also has a number of points that are typical mistakes that people make when they think about utilitarianism. And I'm going to say, if he were serious about utilitarian thinking here, he has an awful lot of work to do. And I'm going to read you a list. And it's going to be a little tiresome. It's a little mind-boggling. If you're really going to decide, am I going to disclose or not disclose? And how will this come out? How will this work? What is the consequence? Because all utilitarians are consequentialists. They say the goodness or lack of goodness of an act is based on the consequences. You get good results, you've done good. The ends justify the means. Machiavelli. Classic. You know, if you get to a good result, forget about how you got there, you have done good, period. So how does he know how it will turn out? What does he have to know? The likelihood of an earthquake? The likely impact of an earthquake on the bridge using Midwest hardware bolts? The likely impact of an earthquake on the bridge using your competitor's bolts? Got to compare. There's one option, there's another option, there's probably 3 or 4 options here. How do each of them play out? This is starting to get complicated, right? The average number of cars on the bridge at any one time over 24 hours. Whether earthquakes along the New Madrid line are apt to happen during the day, in the early morning hours, who knows? The value of human lives and property on that bridge on average, the cost to society of replacing that bridge in the future, the benefit or utility to society of the bridge actually withstanding the earthquake, assuming it's not the Midwest hardware bolts in there, and the costs or disutility of not having that bridge in place after the earthquake. What will happen if you disclose the defect rate to the contractor? What are the probable actions of the contractor in response to your disclosure, in other words? What are all the other options? Have you calculated, forecast, predicted the results of that? If you haven't done a thorough utilitarian analysis. You say, well, this is good for Midwest Hardware. You know, we have jobs, we can create value, we got a good management team. Oh yeah? Really? Get back to that place where you're saying, this is good for me and my company. And my company is a good company. You got to believe in yourself, right? You got to believe in your company. But we can put blinders on ourselves. Objectively, realistically, who should ask that question? The likelihood that Midwest Hardware's management is going to take the profits from this bridge deal and create more value. Will they? Is it a good management? How do they treat their employees, their customers, their stakeholders? If it's poorly managed and cannot produce better bolts to begin with, their competitor does better, how important or useful is it to society that Midwest Hardware survives and thrives as a business entity? It seems important if it's you, if it's your company, but is it? Okay. Yak, yak, yak. Here's a question for you. All these calculations to be a true utilitarian, I know there's only a couple of you in the audience, but assume you're a utilitarian. Would Sam or Midwest actually do this calculation? Raise your hands if you think they would actually say, okay, I'm a utilitarian. I'm going to think about all these possibilities and map them out and do a clear cost-benefit analysis for society. How many people think? Raise your hand if you think they would not. It's unrealistic, right? Tom Dunphy's right. You know, hey, yeah, I'm a utilitarian. Well, but you're not really able to do the work. And in fact, what we do, because Kahneman, Tversky, and other behavioral psychologists make it clear to us that we don't know sometimes what our subconscious motives are and what the little tricks that happen to us internally are actually doing. We kind of put out the rosy scenario, oh, the bridge is not going to fall down, and I can sure use this bonus, and all is good. Now, interestingly, your text says, we don't judge the quality of Sam's decision. That's on page 153. I am not willing to suspend judgment if the only ethical justification is utilitarianism. You better do it right. You better look at all potential upsides and downsides to all stakeholders, present and future. Okay? I'm being waved at. Everything okay? So much for utilitarianism. Notice what we've got here so far. We've got Friedman saying, don't be deceitful. So he flunks that test if he's going to decide not to disclose. He's probably not really a utilitarian. Your book points out, there's Kant. You want to be a follower of Kant. Deontology. Rules, not results. The book is basically right on here. It says, okay, he's got a duty to tell the truth. Truth-telling is universalizable. The book treats this very well. Fine. If he's going to tell the truth, he will disclose. So far, 3 ethical perspectives say, you know, he's going to disclose. Now, since I'm looking at the clock and I want to make sure there's time for questions, I will say that this is probably the most important part of the handout that I will not talk about this afternoon. From Aristotle to Michael Josephson, the theory and tradition of virtue ethics is alive and well and extremely helpful. I recommend it as a matter of personal and corporate growth. It's undertaken quite a revival. The first business ethics people talked about Kant, they talked about utilitarians, and only later was there a lot of discussion about the virtue ethics of Aristotle and others. What I do for you in the handout is to talk about virtue ethics up to date with these core values and explaining what these core values are. See, ethics is not all that hard to understand. It's just hard to